Well, today's super fun. Tiana, welcome to the Live Big, Live. How do I mess this up every time? Live Big, Lift Big podcast.
Yay!
Brian was obviously like our first guest just because we were nerding out over like cycles and training, but you're kind of like our first official guest, which is super awesome. So I would love, no pressure. So I would love to start and just kind of let you free reign on, who is Tiana? Give us a little bit about your backstory. And then we have some really fun questions for you because it's like across the board, I think you're kind of similar to me where it's like, you've just lived so many lives that like people can relate to something, right? So let's get into it. Go.
Okay, so I'm Tiana. I actually connected with LCK way back in, what would that have been? 2016, I think, because I have a long history of eating disordered stuff, which we can talk about or not talk about. I don't know what direction we're going to go. But during my last year of physical therapy school, stress was super high. I was training my face off, which was my one and only coping strategy for the majority of my life. And my eating disordered stuff was real bad. And I heard, I think this was when you were working for Jason Phillips.
Mm-hmm.
So I heard some podcast or something and reached out to Jason Phillips' nutrition company and like was literally paired with you as my coach.
Yeah. Well, you were literally one of my like first 5 clients. Like you were, you were like test subject 001. You were like the original guinea pig.
Yeah, you get Laurie. I was like, who's Laurie? Sounds great. And then that year I was still running ultras. I think I was finishing up that year. I think I ran 5 50Ks and I was working with you at the end of that year.
You were doing the most because you were doing CrossFit and marathon training.
Like 60 miles of running a week on top of like 5 days of CrossFit, eating like no food. Laurie was like, you're doing what?
Sounds about right for Laurie.
Well, and you like did the great Tour Divide when we were coaching together too. So like
I think that was before. The Tour Divide was before. Because that was when I was in my psych program, my master's program.
Okay. I just remember like the consensus was like every day you'd be like, I'm doing the most. And I'd be like, but are you eating the most? Like, girl, can you eat more food? And you'd be like, no, like I'm good. I'd be like, but girl, like food, let's go.
So that was kind of like my background, maybe I should start a little before that. I did my bachelor's in psychology. And then after undergrad, my career path was going to be a psychologist. Like I applied to 5 master's programs in psychology and 5 doctoral programs, because you need a PhD to practice psychology. I got into one program. I got into one master's program and it was in Flagstaff, Arizona. And I was like, well, looks like I'm moving to Arizona. I'd never been to Arizona before. So I got in my car with my best girlfriend at the time, Paige Cochran, who was a psychic energy healer, spiritual type person, and like
got a bunch of crystals.
literally like the most
sage in the apartment.
Yes. And we drove across the country from South Carolina and we stayed in a hostel in Flagstaff for 2 weeks while I found a place to live, and she got me settled out there. And I did my master's program in clinical health psychology. So clinical health psychologists work with people that have like chronic health conditions. So anything from like diabetes to like anxiety to migraines, like a wide range of things, but kind of the psychological part of like some of the chronic healthcare stuff. And one of the things we actually did in that program was run weight loss groups, kind of like habit-based weight loss groups. So we used I think it was Epstein, like red, yellow, green food system was what we used. So that was kind of my first like exposure to like nutrition coaching. I didn't I was like not thinking nutrition coaching at all at the time, but that was kind of my like intro to it looking back. Long story short, I finished the master's program, decided I didn't want to practice psychology, and spent the next year doing some prerequisites to go into physical therapy school. Got into physical therapy school. NAU actually has like a top 50 like nationally ranked program. It was a really like pretty prestigious school in terms of physical therapy. So I freaking hustled to get into that program, like networked my ass off. Like I did everything and I got in. And I was like really excited. I was like, all right, like a career that like I'm freaking hyped on, like let's freaking do it. And long story short, after a year of practice, I was like, this ain't it either.
You totally swerved. Yeah.
I swerved. I mean, literally after the first 6 months of practicing physical therapy that I was on a call with Laurie because she was still coaching me. And she was like, why don't you try nutrition coaching? And I kind of just like looked back at my background. And I mean, the big piece that I was missing was like the hard, like science, like nutrition education. But I had like all of the behavioral change stuff and I had the communication skills and I had a lot of the, like, I guess you might call them like softer skills that I thought would make a really good like coach. So I was like, okay, like I know how to learn stuff. Like I'm really like at this point, I'm 7 years deep in freaking grad school. I'm like, I can go and learn some of the hard nutrition stuff. So I took the Nutrition Coaching Institute course, mentored under Laurie and just like started studying my face off. I just read a ton of nutrition textbooks. And at this time, Chris Master John was putting out a ton of like really good, like kind of more nerdy nutritional content. So I was following him really closely. And I studied my face off for that first year and then started coaching people full time. And I think I officially quit physical therapy literally after a year. So I think I quit mid 2018. And then I've been coaching full time since then.
Well, and I think on my end, it was so interesting because it's like, that's a common theme you see with nutrition coaching is it's like you're working with people and they're really passionate about certain things. And there's certain things that like light them up and bring them so much joy. And I remember like with the work stuff for you, it's like, it was kind of the start and end to so many problems because it was just this chronic stressor for you that it's like you were working so much, you were so stressed out, but then mutually it's like you weren't making good money. You were super stressed out about like, oh my gosh, I have so many thousands of dollars
of student loans.
I remember you told me that I was like, holy crap. Like I was like, yeah.
Yeah. So that was like next level loans.
So it was cool though, right? Because it was like you have those conversations where it's like, well, what's the long-term game here? Because, you know, if we have this chronic thing in our life that's just plaguing and almost like, you know, like poisoning everything, you know, it's like everything in life's going to be broken. So like it was cool to see that, you know, it's kind of like, hey, like, let's talk about this work thing and, you know, kind of trying to go a different direction. So it was cool though that, you know, you were able to kind of look the bigger picture and step back and realize like this thing isn't serving me, which it's a bummer, but you know where do we go from here? And like, how do we serve into things? Like that was just so cool.
Well, I mean, it was honestly like my worst fear had come true because after my first semester in my master's program in psychology, my first year, after the first year, so the summer in between my first and second year, I went into my advisor's office and I was like, I really don't want to fucking do this. Like, I'm going to quit. And she looked me dead in the face. She was like, you're not quitting. You're going to finish this program. And so I finished that second year, like knowing that it was like a dead end thing that I didn't want to do anything with it. And then I got into physical therapy school. And this time, after the first year, one of my advisors pulled me into their office and they were like, you don't want to freaking be here, do you? And I was like, no, like, this is what I want to do. Like, I know this is what I want. And so like, I think at that point, I really did. I thought I was going to fall in love with it and I was so convinced that I wasn't going to invest all this time and energy in yet another program and like come out of it and not want to do the thing. So I think I was just like, I had convinced myself that I wanted to do it. And I don't, I might end up going back to it at some point too. I have no idea. I just know that like, in terms of like personality traits, like extroversion, introversion, like your girl is like, we are introverted AF. And so like to jump into a career where I was interfacing one-on-one with people for 8-10 hours a day, like it's just like, it doesn't really suit my personality style. So, I mean, I think there's a way that I could maybe engage with it differently, maybe down the road, but the like one-on-one clinic setting was like, not it.
Do you feel like, because like something I commonly hear, especially with like PTs or just like, I would say medical professionals in general, is it's like if they go the route of like, they run their own business, they work for themselves and they don't take insurance and therefore can treat how they want to treat, it's like totally a different ballgame. But it's like so many people I hear struggle with I work for a company that's very, very large or bigger than myself. We can only practice what insurance, deems acceptable, or, it's like we have this cookie cutter plan. Where did you kind of fall on that spectrum? Like aside from the actual personality.
That's the thing is like the clinic I was working in was like a mom, like the people that owned it, like I was good friends with them. Like it was just two people that owned it. It was a small clinic. It specialized in chronic pain, which is something that I actually enjoyed treating. And I never had to treat more than one person at a time, which is very common in clinics. You have like 2 or 3 people that you see and you're delegating tasks to physical therapy assistants. Like I didn't have any of that. I had one person at a time. I had 45 or 60 minutes to treat depending on what I wanted. So in terms of like, if I could have designed an ideal clinic for myself, like I was in the setting that if it was going to work, like it would have worked. And the fact that it like didn't even work there, it was like, I don't think this is it.
So what made you, I guess, make that transition to nutrition coaching? Was it, what was that for you?
So I think, I have had a complicated relationship with food and body image like my entire life. I grew up just kind of like troubled, I guess you would say. Like I was just always very angsty, and like the specifics of what happened are irrelevant, but I just always like, I think because I don't know why it happened, but I always had a problematic relationship with food, and it ranged from like restriction to like binging. And when I started using drugs and alcohol pretty early in my life. And when I was 18 years old, I got clean and sober. I stopped using drugs and alcohol. And that was when my eating stuff got like really bad because I no longer had this thing that had been like my primary coping mechanism. And so I did the master cleanse, and I remember like going to hot yoga classes and like literally like passing out in class because I hadn't been eating. Like I was full on the side of like restricting. And then once I finished playing, I played soccer through college. So I was like dealing with all this weird eating stuff while I was like a college athlete. So once I had finished the whole soccer thing and gotten into grad school and stuff, I started running a lot. And the thing with endurance exercise is like, it like totally fucks your appetite. So I was like, just like could not eat enough food to like literally like compensate for the amount of training I was trying to do. So then I had this like other like binge eating stuff going on, and had always had like, I think I've talked about this a little bit off and on over the years. Like I've definitely tried to like spiritualize kind of my like body image issues to like, I practiced a lot of yoga. I taught yoga for a long time. And I think I got to a place where I was like, I don't care what I look like. And I almost like full on like detached from my body image at all. It was just like, you know what? Mm-hmm. My body just is what it is. Like I was so distressed about how I like looked and felt in my body that I just had to like kind of like check out from it. And, through working, once I finally hired Laurie and through working with her and like actually learning, hey, if I actually eat enough food consistently, like I'm not binging my face off all the time. Like, this is odd. So we like had worked through kind of this like system of like getting my calories up and getting my activity level more manageable, because like ultimately if you're doing so much activity, like there's no amount of food you can eat that is going to allow you to recover. I mean, literally, like I was running 60 miles, like 60-mile weeks. I remember I would go to CrossFit and we would do like, you know, strength, Metcon, whatever. I'd be there for almost 2 hours and I would literally like change my shoes. I had a little backpack I would run with my water and I would go out for a 20-mile run. Like that was normal. And I remember one day I stopped. I was like 12 miles in or something. And my body, like, I remember my body was like, just like exhausted. And I remember it so clearly. I was so upset and like confused. I was like, what is wrong with my body? Like, why is it so tired? Like, why can't it do this? Like, I was like legitimately like confused about why my body like couldn't do what I was asking it to do. And I look back now, I'm like, well, duh. Like, obviously. But I think just kind of like working through all of my sort of like coping mechanisms through like over-exercising and eating and getting that stuff to a place where it was like well managed. It was like, I mean, literally transformational for me. Like I finally had the mental space to like do other stuff with my life that I didn't have when I was so consumed by trying to navigate this like eating and body image stuff.
Yeah, you had this whole world ahead of you besides like what you look like, right?
Literally. Yeah. And that's kind of why, like, I mean, full circle, it's been strange.
But that's interesting. Yeah, because now.
it's strange to find myself like pursuing like physique sports, which is how I think about it at this point. Like, but I think and there's definitely a lot that I have to learn with like the bodybuilding stuff. And prep is really hard on you personally. It's hard on your relationships. It's hard on everything. I think the reason that like personally that I feel okay with how I've managed the like body image side of things is because I struggled with that stuff for so long. And I came into like competing in bodybuilding with such a like unique perspective on like I liked myself. I wasn't chasing like validation through like looking a certain way. Like I had learned to appreciate my body at 170 pounds. I had learned to appreciate it like in all these different phases. And so then like Alberto Nunez, he talks about like your body in prep, your body for stage, like it's like an outfit that you put on. And like, I really feel like I had that like perspective, like this is an outfit that I'm putting on for this thing. And then when this thing is over, like I need a different outfit. Like there's no reason to stay at 10 or 12% body fat. Like it's literally fucking dumb if I have any interest in like managing my health. Or, I mean, generally, if you're competing in physique sports, you have some interest in your physique looking better the next time than it did previously. Yeah. So it's like the longer that you spend at 10, 12% body fat, it's like you're not helping your future self at all. Like,
yeah, you're leaving some gains on the table by staying there.
Just get the fuck out of like get out. Just get out of there. And I think too, like it's challenged me to like really own and feel comfortable and confident with like my body weight swinging around. Because people make comments, you know, like I feel really good about how like the rate of weight gain I had after my first show. Like I got up, I think to like 160, 165. And I did that because I knew I wanted to turn around and compete again the next year, because the first time I competed, I literally decided I was competing like 3 weeks out. Like it was just kind of a shit show. Like I was just doing a fat loss phase for Instagram. I happened to get really lean. Someone was like, hey, you should try this thing. You should get on stage. And I was like, okay.
So this was your first
my first competition.
Your first figure competition.
So That was 2021.
So you were just doing a cut.
Yeah.
Or just losing body fat. And then you were like, somebody was like, put this idea in your head and you decided to roll with it.
Literally. Like, and that fat loss phase in 2021 was like,
I remember that actually. Yeah.
That was the first time I had dieted since working with Laurie. Like I had done a couple like little cuts for like a weightlifting competition, but I had never done like a 12-week like fat loss phase. And in 2021, I was like, I think I'm ready. So I did it, and people started messaging me like, "Are you getting on stage?" And I was like, "No, I'm not getting on. What the fuck are you talking about? Like, I'm not getting on stage."
I love how like that's like it's like, oh, you're super lean, you're shredded, you should go compete in bodybuilding.
Like, no, like what the fuck? And I had hired Sam Okinola. I can't say his last name. He works with RP. I had hired him because my sister dragged me into helping her with a photo shoot for some brand she was working with. So I had hired him just to like help me look better for that photo shoot. And he saw my physique and he was like, "Are you competing? Like, why the fuck aren't you getting on stage?" And I was like, "What? Like, what are you talking about?" And he was like, "You should just do it." Like, he's like, "If I find you a show in 4 weeks, like, will you do it?" I was like, "I don't know." And he pulled his Instagram and he was like, "Should Tiana compete?" And everyone was like, "Yes." I was like, okay.
And also to kind of like put 2 and 2 together. So like, obviously everybody knows me as like the queen of like makeup and hair extensions, like all this stuff. Like Tiana is like 150% the opposite of like living her best life on the beach. Like, I always joke about like
any makeup, Laurie. Like zero. Like I have contact solution in my glasses on my vanity. For the record.
What is that like? Although you did get hair extensions for your last figure show, right?
I did. I like the first year. The first year was just like, "Hey, don't fucking fall on your face on stage." And I was like,
especially
okay.
those heels, man.
What the fuck, you girl? I played soccer. Like I don't do sports in heels. I didn't know how to do that. The first show was a shitstorm. Like, let's just be clear. But like, I did it, and it was enough to get me interested that I was like, I want to do that again. And so. Like, I think I pushed my like recovery phase a little bit harder because I knew I wanted to turn around and get on stage again the next year.
So what's that process like? I mean, for those people that aren't familiar with like the whole prepping for because you do figure, is that correct? That's figure. Yeah.
So
what's that look like?
Briefly, like the categories. So bikini is like probably what a lot of people think of at this point, which is strange because bikini is like one of the newest categories, but it's probably what a lot of people think of because a lot of girls on Instagram, when they're posting, they're bikini girls. So bikini is like the least amount of muscle. And then you have wellness, which is like bikini upper body, but like thick as fuck, legs. You got a
big old booty. That's what it is.
Big old booty. So wellness is unique because symmetry is big in bodybuilding, but in wellness, they literally want you to be like literally not symmetrical. Like your lower body should be substantially larger than your upper body. So that's like bikini wellness. And then figure is the class I compete in. So a lot of like women that have like done sports or have like good muscle density, like sometimes figure is a good spot because I just have muscle from like doing stuff over time. That's kind of where I landed. But you still wear heels, which is what it is.
And you do all the hand poses too, right?
Yeah.
And then there's physique, which is like a little bit more muscle than figure. And those girls are barefoot and they do like these like cool choreographed routines to music, like posing routines. And then the bodybuilding girls are yoked as fuck. So I'm still like on the lower levels of like muscle mass for like the bodybuilding deal. Mm-hmm. What was the question? I don't even know.
I was just curious. Like, what's the process look like? So from, if someone was saying like, "Hey, I want to do a bodybuilding competition, like a bikini or figure or whatever," like, what's that look like from like start to finish? Like, at least from a dieting standpoint.
a lot of hunger. And then a lot more hunger. And then
I think people don't realize that,
competing, like how it's like even more hunger.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think like anything, like there's levels to it, right? And I was actually just talking to a client that I'm working with, and she's getting ready to do her first show this year. And the way I was explaining it to her is like anytime you do like the type of fat loss phase or diet prep, whatever you want to call it, to get on stage, like it really is like a, what is it, robbing Peter to pay Paul kind of situation. Like, so the harder you diet, arguably like the harder your recovery phase is going to be. And so I think for like a first time athlete, it's probably less productive to think about how do I get this person in the best shape possible, and more productive to think about like how much can they handle on the backside of it. You know,
I've never heard it put that way, but yeah.
A lot of people like, I mean, if you want to do one show, like just to like check it off, like a bucket list thing, then, you know, maybe you just like, you freaking get after it and you know that you're just going to be fucked up on the other side of it and you're like, okay with that. But if you want to like be in the sport and compete like over time, like you don't want to just be totally fucked up after your first show. Like, you know, like you want to be able to improve over time. So I think that's what made this last year for me interesting, is that I already had like the first kind of like trial year under my belt. And so this year I was like, okay, like I felt like I kind of knew how to diet to that intensity. So I felt like I would be able to push a little bit harder. And I mean, according to the DEXA, we did push harder. We got like 2% leaner. I mean, visually, I definitely looked leaner. I feel like we dug harder this year. But just to kind of tie that back in, like, I don't think I would have been prepared to like push as far as I did in this past year, like the first time I competed. Like, it just wouldn't have made any sense, because even the recovery phase, like this time around, like just to give you guys some numbers. So I dieted into the show on like 1,500 calories for the last few weeks. And then pretty much immediately after the show, we bumped me back up to like 2,800. And then
was that your maintenance, or was that just
close-ish?
Yeah.
I think maybe we did a week at like 26, or I had like a week where I didn't track or whatever. And then we just like bumped right back up. And then I gained, I think I just looked at my numbers. I think I was gaining at like a rate of 1.6 pounds a week for the month after the show, which was probably pretty appropriate for where I happened to land. And a lot of this stuff is maybe not helpful to talk about like absolute numbers, because it's more probably helpful to think about like percentage of body weight. Cause like, you know, if you're a larger human, like you're just going to swing around more. But for me as a 150-ish pound person, like, I feel like that rate of gain, you know, if I gained 1.5 pounds a week, 6 pounds in a month, like that's probably pretty reasonable.
So what was your, like, when you started, what was your weight and body fat? And then when you competed, what was your weight and body fat?
I think I started prep up, I hit a high of like 163-ish. And I think we started cutting like in January, and the first few months were kind of a disaster. I think I traveled to Colorado in February. I got COVID. So January and February are kind of weird, but I don't remember what my body fat was specifically. Oh, I think I was up around like 18 or 19%. I do remember. Which
is still pretty lean for a
woman. That's according to the DEXA. Like, so, I mean, I don't know. And I even did like a post, like a side-by-side with my sister, because she's a little bit taller than me. And like, she always just looks really lean, but she actually went with me to get a DEXA that time. And she was like 18% body fat. And I was like 19, and you put us next to each other. And like, I definitely looked like, I'm not saying fat as like a negative. I'm just like, I looked fatter than her, like substantially. And like our body fat percentages were very similar. It was like, I think it has a lot to do with like how much like muscle you have and then like how your body fat like looks on top of that. Like I have a ton more muscle than she does. So like my body is just like bigger. But that was just like kind of a cool experience to like have with her because, you know, our body fats were relatively similar and like our shape and size is just totally different. But yeah, so I started around 160-ish, 19% body fat. And then I think the DEXA I did right before the show, I was hanging out around like 140 at like, I think one of the DEXAs had me at like 8 or 10% or something like that. Like it was fucking low.
Wow.
I mean, you were shreddy.
I don't think I was truly 8%, but I think I think 10 is probably fair.
How did you feel like during this process?
Such a hard question. This is like, I feel like this is like the hardest question to answer because if you've ever done anything that's like difficult for a long amount of time, like you don't like sit around and think how terrible you feel. Like it's just like
while you're in the moment.
Literally, it's like cognitive dissonance. Like your brain like just can't imagine that you like feel that terrible. So you just like you convince yourself that like you're fine and like your entire world around you is like on fire and you're like, I'm totally fine. Like, what the fuck?
It's like that meme with the like
dog
everything's
in the
fine.
burning house.
It's like everything's on fire.
Yeah. You're like, but I'm fine. Like, it's all good. What the hell? I mean, I think like, and I was just reflecting on this too. You know, I'm in a time in my life where like, I don't have kids. Like like my responsibilities are myself and running my business. And I live in a place where it's super easy to be active. Like my schedule super flexible. So I think like I have this unique kind of time when I can participate in this sport like in a pretty unique way that I probably won't be able to do in 2 or 5 years. So I think like given the environment that I've created for myself, like I could feel really fucking terrible and still like show up and like do my job well and like do all of my daily things okay. But I think it would have been a lot harder or like I would have had to manage stuff differently if I had like an office job or I had to like interface with people more. If I was like, I know a lot of personal trainers like prep. I'm like, how the fuck do you train clients for like 8 hours a day? Like while you're dieting, like I could barely even like, I look back at like some of my stories and I'm like talking slow, like shit is not working up here. I think that was the biggest thing I noticed this last prep, was just like my cognitive function was like pretty fucking terrible. Even my like energy throughout the day, like if I kept myself moving and walking, I actually like felt okay. But my brain power like took the biggest hit pretty early on too. That was interesting.
So, Tiana, obviously we'll kind of count out your first show since that was just kind of like a fuck around, find out, like you literally just started, signed up for a show.
100%.
So it's like when you kind of decided like, oh, this was fun, like I want to do this again. What was the timeline between, you said you were like, cause you're 5'6", right? 5'5", 5'6". So you were 5'6", and you were about 160 something pounds. And then by stage, you got down to 140. What was the time frame difference between that? Like how long were you prepping to go into the show?
So I think I'm looking at my graph. I think we officially started dieting. Let's see. I think we started like in January and the show was the end of July. So maybe it was like 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
With pretty much at some point, Sam, like 2 months before the show, he's like, we haven't had any diet breaks. I was like, we've had no diet breaks. Like no
Dude,
diet breaks.
I remember you came to, cause I was in Austin that second show and you came to Austin and
did I look tiny?
You looked super tiny, but also too, like you were saying that your diet was so clean that asparagus tasted sweet. Like, I don't even know, like vegetable. like I'm like, I've never heard that before ever in my life.
So this was some other like rabbit hole that I've been super fascinated like in learning about with this whole prep stuff is how much like my hunger and satiety hormones like fluctuated during all of this. And how like when I was super lean, like literally any food item tasted fucking phenomenal. Like asparagus, like it literally tasted like dessert with a little bit of salt. I was like, oh, this is amazing. But I think that's like, I had never experienced that before. And like, that was like a next level of like dieting to me. I was like, oh, this is like fucking weird. Like people always have weird prep stories. So the freezer or refrigerator we had in the hotel in Austin, like it was supposed to be a refrigerator, but it ended up like freezing stuff. And so I had all these hard boiled eggs that I had put in there and they had frozen.
And you ate them, didn't you?
I did. I was so hungry.
You had exicles.
Ice cubes.
You had exicles.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh.
Them. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you got to do what you got to do, though. You know, and you were hungry.
What did your nutrition choices kind of look like? Well, again, just call this like your first prep since it was your first like, official one. But like, I think it's common, especially when we watch social media, you see so much of kind of like the, if it fits your macros approach, where it's like everything that people are eating is sugar-free, very, like very processed and stuff like that. So it's like reversely, especially after coaching for years with you, your nutrition was always the opposite, where it was a lot of whole foods. And it wouldn't just be like, oh yeah, I eat fruits and vegetables. It'd be like, I eat like 1,200 grams of fruits and vegetables. So like, if you were gonna
plants.
So if you were gonna summarize, like, how did you choose, what foods you were eating during prep and stuff like that?
So I think this is, again, like the hunger and satiety hormone stuff. I kind of like went pretty deep down this rabbit hole. Like pretty much the entire prep, I was like, what food choices can I make that are going to make me feel the most satisfied? Because again, like when you're dieting for 6 months, like, you know that you're going to get to a point where you're hungry more often than not. And I do think there's like a timestamp on how long anyone can like tolerate that. So I was really making an effort to like stay as satisfied as possible for as long as possible. So I was doing a ton of like, I figured out, I know not everyone can tolerate raw vegetables, but they actually work really well for me. And like the crunchy, like chewing thing is really good for satiety. So I would just like cut up, pretty large bowls of like, I'd have carrots, zucchini, eat a ton of just like raw plants. And I go in phases with like meat where I just have no interest in eating meat whatsoever. I was vegetarian for a long time growing up. I don't know if it has anything to do with that, but I'll like go in phases where I'm like, I don't want to freaking eat chicken. So I'll just like, I'll eat my plants and I'll have a protein shake or something. And so there's times where I actually get a lot of my protein, like from protein supplements, like powders and shakes and stuff. And I mean, I don't think it's a terrible thing. I'm still hitting my protein requirements, like whatever. But so I would do some of that. But when I was eating protein, it's all basic stuff like chicken. We have a local seafood market. So I was going out there and all the guys at the seafood market were convincing me that the fish was way better raw than it was cooked. So I was doing like ceviche and like just a ton of just like basic, boring protein foods. Like the other thing about Key West that makes it different is like, we don't have Costco, we don't have Whole Foods, we don't have Trader Joe's. So
cooking is not canceled.
Cooking is not canceled. So, my food is super basic, like chicken, ground beef, ground turkey. I fuck with tuna packs and canned salmon. Like I'm not opposed to those things.
Yeah.
I will eat them. And yeah, like, oh my gosh, I did so many berries, like raspberries, blueberries, blackberries, avocado, nuts and seeds for fats. Like that was like pretty much how I thought about it during prep. It was like, I need a protein source. I need a ton of plants to get my carbs in. I still kept in cereal post-workout because I fucking love cereal. It's crunchy. And I think that there are some potential benefits to having those faster digesting carbs in the post-workout window for recovery, even if it meant I was a little bit more hungry. I thought that the recovery benefit was worth it. So I did have
what are
like
your
some
top two
cereal.
Yeah.
Lucky Charms. Duh.
Well,
and then
probably
healthier
like than meat, but I don't know. According to that little article.
How many people sent me that story? I got that shit so many times. I was like, whatever.
Lucky Charms is the GOAT, though.
Lucky Charms, or I really like what is it? Crispix.
Okay.
Which is like what, half corn and half rice, I think.
Yeah. Definitely a cinnamon Chex, cinnamon toast, any cinnamon cereal for sure.
Yo, so good. Yeah. Cereal is like, I feel like too, like, I think for me, there's like some emotional stuff with cereal because it was a food that I used to like binge on, like pretty like boxes of cereal. And so the fact that I can like now like eat some after a workout and like, that's it. It's like, I'm like, yes, like we're winning.
I actually have two questions for you, Tiana. One is, what are a lot of your like go-to carbs? Because you kind of talked about like what proteins and stuff you frequent, like what fruits and veggies. So my question was, what carbs do you love frequenting? And then I would love to actually talk more about like what binging looked like for you personally, just because I think that a lot of people will be able to relate to that.
Yeah. Well, this is going to be really boring for everyone also. I love oatmeal, which I actually don't really eat oatmeal. I didn't eat any oatmeal during prep because even though people say it's really satisfying, like it doesn't really do that for me. So I actually didn't I prioritized eating like crunchy cereal over like oatmeal during prep because it felt more satisfying. That's kind of a side note, but, oatmeal, potatoes. I haven't done sweet potatoes very much lately. Cereal. Oh my God. I do Jersey Mike sandwiches. So bread, white bread. Yeah, I'm like super boring with food. I'm a dog. I'll literally eat the same stuff for like months at a time.
Well, it kind of helps because I mean, if you're trying to control for calories, which you have to in this particular case to get a certain level of leanness, like you almost have to have like very staple foods.
Well, that's what I don't write meal plans for people. That's just like not how I prefer to coach. But as I'm working into coaching competitors, I'm like, hey, like there's nothing that says you have to eat the same foods, but like there's a reason that bodybuilders like do that. And it's because it just removes some variability from the equation because I mean, with food tracking in general, we all know there's a bunch of variability anyways. So like when your meals are consistent, like you just kind of remove that piece of the puzzle. And that's something else too, that like, as I got closer to the show, like in bodybuilding, you do care about like your waistline and like what your midsection looks like. So as I got closer to the show, like I had to take my plant intake down just so like my midsection was not like, hey, there's 5 pounds of plants in here. Like, cool. So again, that's why I was trying to prioritize like feeling satisfied for as long as possible. Cause then towards the end, it's like, you need to pick some lower residue foods to fill your macros with because it just takes up less space in your gut.
Oh, do we have that question about the bin?
Oh, yeah. What was the next question?
Yeah. So circle back, just because we talked a lot about like, I just kind of thought it would be helpful to circle back to what did eating disorder and specifically like binging was something that you just really struggled with. So like, what did that look like for you? Because I do remember one thing that you did a lot of was journal, and you would journal and just talk about, hey, this is what I'm up to. This is how I'm feeling. And I loved that you did that because, it was just a place to kind of stop and reflect and get to circle back to feelings and stuff like that. But yeah, what did the eating disorder look like for you? Were there certain things that would trigger those binges? What did those binges look like?
I mean, now that I have like so much education and like experience in the space, like I think I can clearly say that like I was asking more of my body than it could recover from. So I definitely think like at this point, looking back, I would say there was a very clear like physiologic component underneath of the emotional stuff that was driving the behavior as well. I think when I was in it, I didn't understand like any of the physiology stuff that was going on. So I thought it was just this like emotional coping strategy that I had developed. So I think it's definitely like just given, like, it's been cool to get some perspective on like, hey, like this wasn't just something that I was doing because like I was emotionally fucked up. Like this was something that like I had developed as a coping mechanism. And it was clearly exacerbated by the fact that I had no ability to moderate my physical activity whatsoever. So I think for me, like, I mean, I think when I was struggling with it a lot was during those clinical like rotations. So physical therapy school is 2 years of courses. And then your third year, you're out on rotations for the entire year. And my first clinical rotation, I was out in Tuba City on the reservation, on the Navajo reservation. So I was like very isolated. And I was doing like a really intense like diet when I was out there. I think I had found like the Michael Matthews, like leaner, thinner, stronger, or some bullshit or whatever the fuck. It was like 400 grams of protein and no carbs. I was like, okay, cool. So when I was out there, like I was like super restrictive diet, like running a lot. And then, I mean, I was just binging because I was like isolated and by myself and stressed out. And then, by the time I had wound up in Prescott Valley, which is when I started working with Laurie, I was still running those ultras. Like I saw one of my training runs recently too, and it was 15 miles on back-to-back days. I was like, what the fuck? Like Saturday, Sunday, 15 miles again, like same course. Like homegirl literally went out and just ran the same course again. Like, I don't know how I did that mentally, but I know that kind of stuff, like, definitely led to me binging. And I think too, just like with all of the work I was doing in physical therapy, like those situations when you're in clinicals, like you're asked to do so much and you're expected to know a lot, and you just don't know shit. And so I think it was like really triggering, or, you know, not trigger, I don't know if that's the right word. It was difficult to be in those situations where your expectations of you are here and like you feel like you're down here. And I think it was just like, yeah, I remember I would like leave work and I would go to the grocery store and I would buy food and I would just like shove it in my face on the way home in the car. Like I wouldn't even get into the house. Like I was just like shoving, like eating pints of ice cream in the car. And I mean, Prescott Valley was pretty bad. Like I called out of work more than I was allowed to because I would literally just like be sick in bed. And then I would do the whole like, you know, I'd go out and I would run, you know, try and run off whatever I had eaten or whatever. That was probably like, I definitely feel like things had gotten better. And then I think that was probably like the worst. That was when they got like really bad. And then it was, since after that time, it's kind of been like recovery road again.
What was like the main catalyst for the recovery for you? Was it, because I know you kind of mentioned it earlier, but I kind of want to,
I mean, I think like if I look at my recovery over like from when I, you know, like let's just say 2017, kind of when the binging was really bad up until like now. So that's like what, almost 5 years?
5-6 years, yeah.
So I think like the biggest piece of it for me was like allowing myself to eat food and like allowing myself to eat more food than I thought I should need to eat or whatever. So, I mean, 2018, I was pretty much living in a body that was like 165, 170 pounds. Like that's where I was living. I was training there. I was Olympic weightlifting at the time. And then, 2019 was when I was like really sick, like adrenal fatigue. Like, I think just my body had kind of shut down from, trying to start the business while I was doing PT stuff. 2019, I was just trying to like feel better, feel like a person again. And like, so there was no dieting there. So I think having a few years where I had like fully embraced like, hey, we're just going to fucking eat food. Like, and we're not going to try and like make our body look a certain shape or size. Like I needed those years. Mm-hmm. And I don't think everyone needs like years of time, but like I literally needed 5 years before I felt like, okay, like I am together enough up here that I can go and try and do a diet and like feel okay about it. And I think too, like, again, like this is why I talk about like the importance of being process oriented with any of this stuff is like, I really think that, if you sign up to do it, if you're like, I want to do a diet and like you're attached to like the end point in your brain and like that's what you're attached to. It's like anything else. Like if you sign up for a thing and you're just thinking about the end point the entire time, it's like, I don't know. I just don't think that's the best way to go about doing stuff.
You get burnt out. You get burnt out. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, not only that, you're just missing the the opportunity for like, you learn so much shit along the way. And this is kind of why I wanted to talk about the Tour Divide thing too. Like, so this thing I did, I was on a bike by myself, literally in the middle of nowhere for like 30 days. I would bike like 100 miles a day, sleep on the ground or in a hotel or some stranger's house or whatever. And I would get up and I would bike again the next day. So it's like 30 days of Tiana biking in the middle of nowhere. And there's like literally like 1 second in time where I actually finish the thing and I like cross the finish line. I make it to Mexico, like 2,700 miles. Like I hit the finish line. And like that experience for me was like, to this day, it gives me goosebumps. It's like, that was where I really like fully learned to embrace like this process orientation mindset because like it was like every single day, like so much shit happened. And maybe the shit was just me counting my pedal strokes for like 18 fucking hours. But like there was so much learning in that. And it's like, if I had gone into that only interested in that moment that I crossed the finish line, like I don't think I would have made it. I think I would have quit. 100%. Like there's no way I would have, my ass freaking hurt, my hands, I had neuropathy for 6 months in my hands. I couldn't feel anything here from like biking, like hands on the handlebars for whatever. But, even like, so bringing that all back around to like the binging stuff, I think for me, the recovery process from my experience with eating disorders was like just embracing my body in all aspects of that process. And I think that's kind of what I just continue to like, kind of like reground in all aspects. Like if you can just focus on the process, then I feel like you set yourself up for a much better level of success than if you're just constantly fixated on this like endpoint thing.
Yeah. Has it been difficult for you to kind of go from that thinking, that mindset and whatnot to doing a sport that is like really focused on what you look like, what your body looks like?
I mean, again, I feel like having this process oriented mindset is what is allowing me to engage in it in a way that like feels like good to me. And to say that I like, it's so weird because, to say that I don't care about what I look like on stage, like that's not entirely true. But to me, the interesting part is everything that takes place leading up to that. And then everything that takes place after that. And it's like, of course I want to show up on stage and like, look my best, whatever that happens to be. But like that's not the interesting part to me. Like, the interesting part is the process that it takes to get there. And then, I mean, the recovery diet stuff is just like fascinating, like to go from watching yourself like be a freaking twig to being like, okay, like, prepare to shove your face with way more food than you have in the last however many months, and prepare to not fucking feel full either. Like, no satiety anywhere. Just like, you're going to keep eating, your stomach's going to feel distended, and your brain is going to continue to tell you that you need to fucking eat. It was the weirdest shit. But it's so strange because I kind of expected it to feel like the binging stuff. But it didn't feel like that. Like, it was just such a, and I don't know if it's just because I have this like new understanding of how all of the hunger and satiety hormones work or whatever, but it was just like wild to like eat until I felt physically full. And then for my brain just to be like, you need to keep eating. Like, my brain was just like concerned for my survival. It was like, no, like, this is not enough food. Like, you need to keep going.
How long did that last for you? Like, if you had your show, like, how long do you feel like you sat in that phase of like, I'm eating and my body is still just like, nope?
I feel like it was, I mean, if I'm honest about it, I feel like it was probably 2 months.
I've heard it can go on for like months with people.
I mean, that is me doing what I thought was a really fucking intelligently planned like recovery diet. So I feel like where a lot of people go sideways is you get this like post-show binge thing that turns into like 1 or 2 weeks of post-show binging. And then people try and like slow down the rate of gain, or even try and like lose weight again, like there. And then that's when your body is just like getting all these mixed signals. And it's like, no, like, and I think I like, because of my history and because of my like intellectual understanding of some of these processes, like, I would say I was probably even more like invested in doing a good recovery diet. I was probably more invested in that than I was like in doing a good prep for the show, because I was like, I don't want to go back into my old eating disorder stuff. And I understand that I'm not going to fucking feel full. So let me make food choices that are as high volume as possible, so I at least have that like mechanical satiety feeling, because you haven't had that in forever either when you're prepping, because you're just like, eating is almost annoying toward the end. It's just like, it just makes you more hungry. You're like, okay, I'm fine. It's like, here's your portion of food. And you're like, oh, fuck. You're like, now I'm really hungry. So, yeah, I think that I was pretty strict with my food choices for, and I know Dr. Mike Israetel like talks about that, like even after any fat loss phase, like your brain is primed to overeat, literally, like from a hormonal perspective. Mm-hmm. So, you know, like the types of food choices you make can have a huge impact on like what your calories end up looking like.
Have you acquired a lot of friends kind of in like the competing and physique and figure world?
I don't have friends, Laurie.
Well, because I asked, because
you guys are my only friends.
I asked because it's like, for people that might not be familiar, like what it's super common to see is that people will, you know, diet down to these super small percentages of body fat for stage. And then it's kind of like, after so many months of restriction, it's very common to see these same competitors posting pictures of like donuts and cookies and pizza and all these things. And so for so many people, it's very common for, kind of like Tiana was alluding, for it not to just be like a 1-time or 2-time thing, but it turns into weeks. And so it's not uncommon to see people rebound super hard after these shows. But kind of as she's alluding also, it's like this fine dance of like, well, yes, I do have freedom to eat more food, but also, you know, like, how do I come back smartly? So I think that's all super interesting.
Well, and it's hard too, because like you need to gain body fat. Like, and this is, again, it's like, this is where like, I think there are levels to it. And it's like the leaner that you get, it's like kind of, it's more advantageous to you to like get the fuck out of there quickly. But you know, I think it's different when you're talking about like, even like female versus male competitors, like dudes, like they can get leaner. So like they just have kind of a bigger hole to dig themselves out of. And I think female competitors, like we have totally different hormonal profiles. Like there's just different shit that I feel like just, it takes time. Like, you know, your sex hormones don't just bounce back overnight. Like, you know, like amenorrhea is not uncommon for competitors. And it's not like, at least this is my opinion at this point, like if you want to be on stage, like if that's what you're doing, like you're signing up to be at like essential levels of body fat. And so you're signing up to like have some fucked up sex hormones. Like that's just part of the gig. But you also have to, I feel like the informed consent piece is like, hey, this is a thing that is likely going to happen. And again, it's like robbing Peter to pay Paul. Like you're going to have to spend some time recovering from that on the other side. And recovering from that, again, in my perspective, is not just go out and smash calories for 2 weeks. It's like give yourself a couple of months where you're actually like eating enough food to recover from whatever time frame that you spent dieting to get down there.
Were you doing regular lab work to basically track what your like thyroid was doing, what your hormones were?
So I tracked, I pulled my thyroid labs. When did I pull them? I pulled them right before the show, I think. And then I pulled them again kind of when I felt like I was recovered, I think like 3 months after. And I mean, I was definitely like hypothyroid before the show, but I have an IUD, so there's no point in me testing like sex hormones because they wouldn't mean anything. But the other thing is that I do have very, very, very low levels of antibodies. My antibodies currently,
thyroid.
My antibodies currently are the lowest that they've ever been. They were the highest back in 2019 when I was going through all of my like whatever the fuck you want to call it, like uber stressed out Tiana body state. And they were only like, I think they were in the 300s or something then. So they were still like low for antibodies, but not zero. And I think currently they're sitting around like 100 or, you know, like they're super low. But that's just something that like I probably do. It's one of the reasons I wanted a longer off season. I'm like, I need some time to not be dieting, like for my hormones and for my fucking mental health. Like that diet, like it was a hard diet. It was a very hard diet. So I wanted some time to not be dieting. So I think this whole year, 2023 is going to be Tiana, like not dieting, getting fucking yoked so that I'm in a good place, like metabolically, psychologically, whatever, to do another, like, you know, relatively hard diet to get on stage again in 2024.
Do you generally periodize and kind of plan out your nutrition and your fitness stuff for like how long or how far in advance would you say you plan those out? Like, is it like a year long? Do you just kind of do like, hey, the next 6 months? Because I was just gonna say, like anybody that follows you on social media, it's so fascinating because again, you love data and you love having a plan. Yes. And so it's like, you know, it's like, I feel like if I was doing this, it would look way different than you're like, okay, here's like the landscape of what we're doing.
I mean, I think like for me, and I think maybe this comes back around to like part of the reason I'm interested in all of this is like, I've been an athlete forever, but I've never like, I don't know. I don't think I've had the like time and space to like invest in like training the way that I've wanted to like for a long time. So now I have it. And so it's like, it's super fun for me to like plan out these longer term things because I know if I want to show up on stage, like looking different in 2024, then it's like, I have, at this point I have 18 months to work with, and it's way more interesting to me to like plan out, like, why wouldn't I structure that out so that I can show up as best as I can, like on stage next time. And I feel like if I'm super meticulous about like how I choose to like manage the like off season, or the thing with bodybuilding is like, it is the sport of like building. So it's like the part that everyone like sees is like the prep stuff, because it's interesting. There's metrics that are, like your body weight's dropping, like, yay, you look leaner. This is cool. But I guess the way that I think about it is like, the meat and potatoes of the shit is like, it's the building, the body building part. It's like when you're eating food and like you're actually trying to grow muscle, because I mean, fat loss is really fucking straightforward. Like, eat less food than activity that you're doing. Like, you have to put less calories in than you're expending. Like, that's literally it. Like, the hypertrophy stuff is like, there's a lot of shit that will make you not grow muscle the way that you want to. So I think like this time period to me is like, it's way more interesting and kind of fun to like work with.
Well, and that's part of that probably too, is also, it's like, people don't really document the growing phase or that building phase as much as
it's really fucking boring.
Right. So it's like, I feel like that's also a thing, is it's like, when we see somebody, if a dude goes from 200 pounds and then gets down to 150, it's like, well, it's also like almost very like satisfying or gratifying to watch, because, reversely, it's like, oh, like, cool, I'm just eating more food, lifting heavier. As far as training stuff, do you pretty much just live in hypertrophy? And are you doing your own programming, following somebody else's?
I am doing my own programming. It's super fun. I love it. I worked with Sam like pretty much through the recovery diet. And then I've just been like in this place where I've been enjoying like writing my programs. So I've been writing my own programs. I've been doing primarily hypertrophy, but I did run a little like 2-week like systemic block before I started my mini cut, just to kind of, my thought process was to like ramp up energy expenditure before I cut calories. And I mean, my cut's going really well. I don't know how much, like how much that played into it, but I enjoyed it. It was fun. And I think it gave me the, adaptations I wanted. So I think just because I have so much time like this year, I would like to program in like a strength phase for myself, because I haven't done that in for fucking ever. And I have some other, like, I will spend some time like, throwing in systemic blocks here and there. But again, it's like meat and potatoes, bodybuilding is like actual hypertrophy. So pretty much anything else that I do is so that I can make those hypertrophy blocks as effective as possible.
Did you mentally struggle, because you kind of came from the high intensity background of like, I'm running for hours on end, and then, obviously like CrossFit, and then you switched to performance, which I think was so crucial, especially when you were kind of in that healing stage of,
oh my God,
well,
girl,
shit,
yes.
Here I am, all of these years of under eating, under eating, overtraining, doing the most have caught up. So I think you did such a smart swerve by being like, hey, I'm going to focus on performance and Olympic weightlifting and how much I'm lifting, rather than, I think that let you kind of step out of, okay, this is, what my body looks like. But did you struggle when you went from all of those modalities to, again, bodybuilding's just so much different, because it's not about stroking the ego. It's not about how much weight can I lift. It's about lifting in high rep ranges. It's about, my muscle connection. So like, what did that transition training wise look like for you? And did you struggle with it?
Well, it was forced because I was broken yet again from weightlifting. So if you guys remember, I had right? Like just kicked you to the curb. Weightlifting said, fuck you, you're done here. It's like, okay. I had like some chronic knee inflammation from all my running that I was getting drained like literally bi-weekly when I lived in Arizona. And my knee stuff just continued to get worse when I was weightlifting and had some PRP injections. I have a torn medial meniscus. I have strained ACL, MCL, and basically no cartilage in my right knee. So like, as the doctor said, it's not if you need a knee replacement, it's when. So like, cool. Thanks, doc. Appreciate you. So like by the end of, I think I weightlifted like through 2020, right? Cause I was weightlifting in my backyard. And kind of toward the end of the year, it was just like more shit was breaking. Like my knee was fucked up, my back was fucked up. And in January of 2021, I had radiating pain and numbness all down the outside of my right leg, like couldn't sit, stand, whatever. So I had decided to take a break from weightlifting to rehab. And I started just doing some bodybuilding training. And after a few months of that, it kind of was like, I was just trying to be, like I was reflecting on everything and I was like, I don't feel broken right now. This is really great.
Well, and I think that's so like underrated about bodybuilding too. Like it's not sexy, but truly it's like, if you know what it feels like to like get done with, workouts and stuff, and you just feel like you played in traffic and stuff, it's like, that is so underrated to just be like, yo, like I'm training hard. I'm garbage. Like, yes.
It was, and I think at that point I was just like, I mean, how many years? Like, I mean, I played like from the time I was 5 years old, I was literally playing like year-round soccer. I played soccer through college and all of my like freaking drug use and debauchery, whatever. Like I somehow managed to still do that. And then ultra running, this endurance biking bullshit that I did, CrossFit, weightlifting, like my little body was just like, help. So, I mean, I think in terms of like, I think I found bodybuilding and appreciated that I no longer felt broken. And I think that has further caused me to like go down all of the like biomechanics, like anatomy, like rabbit hole with it is like, I know that I have a lot of pre-existing injuries and like my joints are like, they just get kind of grumpy pretty easily. And so, yeah, it's been super cool to like, hey, how can I put my joints in really good positions and like train the shit out of my muscles? Like, that sounds cool. Let's do that.
Tiana, so if you were gonna give advice, like if somebody, because I do know a lot of people that it's like competing in some sort of like figure or bikini or something is a goal for people, just kind of like you were saying, like just like a one-time thing, just for funsies. I think a lot of people are like, can I do it? Like, can I buckle in? Can I do this thing? So if you could give advice for someone that was like, hey, I want to do a show, would you suggest they work with a coach? How do they go about finding a good coach? Because I feel like it's super common to see these companies that are just like, hey, eat 1,000 calories a day and put on this bikini, when it's like, it's like you've actually been able to diet on a lot of food. It's like, especially your surpluses, you'll post about like, hey, I'm eating 3,000 plus calories. So it's like, yes. How would somebody go about, like finding the right people to work with, and just kind of what advice would you give them?
I mean, I think, the people I follow are like, it's like 3DMJ, Revive Stronger, like I follow like a lot of the coaches in like the natural bodybuilding space. So I think I don't know anything about like the enhanced things, but I just know that they're over there and that a lot of people end up taking drugs and they don't know anything about what they're taking. So I literally can't say anything about that stuff. I know nothing about it. I just know that I think probably the biggest piece of advice that I would give to someone when they're looking for a coach is like making sure that the coach is like educated and willing to help them in the post-show period. Because that is like, honestly, I mean, prep is like, if you're interested in bodybuilding, if you're interested in doing a bodybuilding show, you're probably a little bit type A. You probably like a little bit more like rigid, like you probably like some rigid guidelines. Like you kind of like that stuff. So honestly, like yes, prep is difficult. You're fucking hungry, you're tired, you're irritable, whatever. But it's easy. You follow the meal, like you hit the calories, you do the steps, you do the training, everything trends in a very pretty direction. You're looking leaner, you look great. You're like, this is cool. And then the post show is like very much less entertaining. People are not interested in it. So it's just like, hey, you did this thing everyone thought was like super awesome. You got all this like social validation and whatever. Enjoy slapping 10 pounds of body fat back on your frame and people being like, what happened? Are you okay? Yeah. Like, I literally had, this person didn't say this directly to me, but they asked someone I knew, like, if I was pregnant because of the way that I had gained body weight back. And again, it's like, I think that's something else that like prep has given me, is that like, it's made me super confident in how I manipulate my body weight. And it's like, it doesn't matter. Like, because at first when I heard that, I was like, what the fuck? And then I was like, it doesn't matter. If that person thinks I look pregnant, that person thinks I look pregnant. Like, I was really confident in how I had managed that post-show period. And yes, it resulted in me gaining some body fat back. My body looked different. Like, if you're going to play in the physique sport pool, you better have a few different sizes of clothes on standby.
I mean, I love what you said earlier about
different sizes of stuff.
Yeah, what you said earlier about like you wear different, like it's like wearing a suit, you know,
yes,
like a costume, yeah, like an outfit. Yeah.
So I mean, I think in terms of like finding a coach, like, you know, ask about how they'll help you manage the post-show stuff. I also think that, again, it's like, I think I've heard like Alberto Nunez talk about this a lot. Like, start working with a coach like way before you think you need to. Like, you probably shouldn't start working with a coach when you want to prep. Like, you should probably work with a coach when you start your off season. And then you do an off season together. Maybe you even do, they call it like a prep positioning cut. Like, because most people like don't just do like one diet to get on stage. Like, most people do like a prep positioning or like a pre-cut, whatever you want to call it, like diet to get like, you know, in the proximity of where they need to be to start their prep. And then maybe you hang out there for a little bit or whatever, and then you prep. But it's like this whole like 12 to 16 week time frame of like, ooh, I'm going to hire a coach and do a show. Like, that's a like surefire way to, I feel like, put yourself in a dumpster fire and pay for it. You're going to pay. Jump in a dumpster fire.
I feel like that's almost the equivalent, right? Of like, sometimes we see that where somebody will be like, hey, I have a wedding in 2 months and I'd like to hire a coach to diet. And you're like,
oh Lord.
No, you know, like, where was this thought like 6-8 months ago, right? So I think kind of same thing. It's like, I love that you brought that up there where it's like, hey, maybe if you're even starting to spin the wheels on like, I think I'd like to compete and I'm like serious about it, that's when to hire a coach, not like, oh, right. I'm trying to DIY this. And
well, and it's like, I mean, here's the thing too. It's like, if you like, when I was prepping, like, people thought I was like I looked sick. Like, you have to understand that like the look on stage is like, it's not what you look like when you're walking around. Like, Alex saw me, like, I didn't look like healthy.
I mean, you look unhealthy, but you definitely were very small. Like, yeah. And
it's weird when you see it like in person. Yeah. It's like, it's not what you see on stage.
And like, I think you were right before the day before, right? So like you had been like kind of drying out a little bit too. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just like, I guess that's maybe something to consider too, is like, you don't like, the look on stage is not what you look like when you're like walking around.
Yeah. Like, you get like, because like the tanning and all that kind of stuff, like, yeah.
So gross.
Got to bend over and they spray that all over in there. Like, make sure you get all in the cracks.
It's like cattle in there. Like, you're just naked with like fans and tanning spray. And like, it's like very unsexy.
What was your digestion leading up to, like, when you were kind of at the tail end of things? Because, and the reason why I ask is I remember that the entire Paragon team was actually at Laura's house. We were basically having like a seminar weekend, and it was like the couple of days right before you were to get on stage, and you had us dying because like every day you were giving a play-by-play where it would be like, guys, I need to get on stage soon. Just please pray your girl's gonna poop. Like what was that like leading up to stage? Because again, it's like food is just so.
I mean, I feel like it's too, like, this is where like shit gets weird, or it got weird for me. I can't speak for everyone. Like I just like, when I was like so focused on like this thing, it's like you're just like, you're fixated on all of your like very basic stuff. Cause that's like the only, like, you get to move around, you get to eat a little bit of food and drink some water. And like, you just like, you don't want extra stuff like sitting in your stomach. It's like, I just need to make sure that I'm freaking regular. So I never really like, I mean, I feel like because I like did so well with like my diet choices, like I never had any like super weird digestion stuff. And I kind of knew that like, if I got up and drank some hot water and like walked around, that I could generally like go to the bathroom. But it was interesting. It was like earlier on, I could walk for like 20 minutes and I could go. And then it was like an hour walk. And then it was like an hour walk and like moving around a little bit more, doing some squats. I may have to drink some coffee and then I could go. So it's just like, it was a very real experience of like everything, like all of my bodily processes, like very clearly like slowing down just because there's like less energy coming in.
Well, but also like I would imagine, especially that last week or two before you get on stage, like that's normal with thyroid stuff anyway, is that you're going to have slower digestion. So it's like, it would be so fascinating to see like, what are thyroid levels like a month out from stage and then like the couple days leading up? Cause I bet it just like swan dives off, you know.
Well, that's like, I mean, I can send you mine. I don't remember the exact values off the top of my head, but that was like, what was so interesting is they weren't like, I guess that's why I think I did it. Like my prep was like good, is that they weren't terrible. And so it's like, okay, I could probably push a little bit harder. Like now that I've dug myself out of like that, like level of hole, I'm like, okay, the next time, you know, if I want to look leaner or I want like, I'm like, I feel like I could dig a little bit deeper into the hole. Like I have a little bit of room. Yeah. My blood work and whatever is going to look a little bit more fucked up, but I'm like, all right, I dug out of that. I think maybe next time I could dig a little bit more. But I think that's like a much more productive way of like, or for me as someone that wants to continue to participate in the sport, like I think that's more productive as opposed to just like you dig yourself, you know, way the fuck down there. And then, I mean, I've had clients like that they, for whatever reason, they just are not informed about what the fuck's going on. And they have these terrible rebounds and they gain 50 fucking pounds and they spend years like trying to undo this 12-week diet that they did, literally.
With your training stuff, did you notice, because normally it's like when you're dieting, you definitely feel way better, obviously, when you're well fed and you know, stuff like that. But like, was there ever a point in your prep that you found training just got exponentially more difficult or like felt harder, took more motivation?
Caffeine, more caffeine. Just kidding. No, I feel
C4
like again,
or bang, which one?
Yeah, literally to the face. How much cold brew can Tiana drink? Like, let's find out. Again, I feel like that, like my experience, I was very clear going into my cut, even early on, that like the purpose of training when you're dieting is to retain the muscle mass that you have. Like you don't have to fucking break any land speed records when you go in there. And so I think I was like just super clear on that up front. And you know, I don't know if it's just my like history with training, like fuck, I've trained in any possible scenario you can imagine. Like my ass has just showed up to training. So I don't think I ever like, I'm not saying I wasn't tired, but there's nothing that stands out to me that was like, oh my God, like that was, you know, super hard. But again, it's like, I feel like it's hard to answer that objectively because in the moment, you know, you're just always making the best of whatever it is. But I think I was very clear on, the purpose of training when you're dieting is to retain the muscle tissue that you have. Like, you don't have to set any PRs. And people are like, well, if you're not setting PRs when you're dieting, you're not training hard enough. I'm like, you know, here's the thing. If you're brand new to training and you happen to decide that you want to diet, which is dumb, you shouldn't do that because you can get a lot of gains by just like eating food and training hard. Like, you're going to set PRs if you're brand new to training. Like, even if your food's low, you're going to set PRs because you're getting so many adaptations. But again, it's a training age issue. It's like, as you train for a longer period of time, the ability to make progress gets harder. And you have to have a more ideal set of conditions around you at any given time to make really good progress. And if you pull your food, that's like you're pulling, it's not impossible, but you're pulling a huge variable that supports you in making progress in those areas. And again, it's like bodybuilding, the physique sport realm is not, it's not a competition of who can bench the most. It's like, who can diet, like, and it's not even just a fat loss game. It's a muscle retention game. It's like, how much muscle can you keep while you get lean as fuck? And that's different than like, how lean can you get, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think also it's like the way I would almost phrase it is that like figure and physique competing is almost how much are you willing to suffer? Because truly, you know, it's like you have so many puzzle pieces that we have to put together here. But ultimately, you know, it's like, how hard can you push that in addition to, you know, who has the best genetics?
Right.
You know, one question I did.
This shape over here.
With figure competing, because I know that certain classes, it's very popular for women to get breast implants. So I was curious, like, is that also something you see in figure? And then is that ever something that you would consider? Or does it even matter?
I mean, I think like a ton of women in all classes, I would say, have like breast implants. I think I'm at this point, like, I'm clear on like where I live currently in bodybuilding and where I have the potential of living. And I'm competing in the NPC, which is an untested federation. So like, I'm not competing in natural federations. I could do that. The tanning is better. The lighting is better at NPC shows. Like, there's a lot of stuff they're bigger. Like, I don't know. That's kind of where I landed. And again, it's like, I'm not competing because I'm interested in winning. Like, I'm competing for the experience of doing it and getting on stage and recovering and everything else. So, I don't think I ever have a chance of like, even if I were to get a pro card, like, even if like, that's like, maybe I get a pro card. My physique would never be competitive, like, as a pro athlete, because I am not willing to do the things that I think would be required for me to be competitive as a pro. So it's like, well, boob implants realistically, like, could potentially be on that list, but there's so much other shit on that list that it's like, no, thank you. Like, I'll keep my team tiny boobs. Like, I'm good.
That's a super mature way to think about it too, you know? Like, you know, you're doing it for other reasons. You're doing it out of the, you know, enjoyment that you're getting out of this process. You're not necessarily trying to like get this to like this upper epsilon type place, and you're really comfortable with who you are and your body and things like that.
I mean, I think that's why I share what I do like on my social media, is because that's the process is what I find interesting. Yeah. And I think I work with 2 people that are competing, like, and I have a lot more clients than that. So, I mean, literally like maybe like 0.5% of my client population are competitors. So I'm not sharing this content because I have a ton of competitors that are following my page. I'm sharing it because I think people are interested. Like people that aren't competing are like, how does this work? Like, what does this look like? And there's a lot of like, I feel like it's better now, but there's a lot of like weird, like hush hush, like people don't talk about like the processes and stuff. They didn't for a long time. And I don't know what that's about, but I have really just enjoyed sharing my processes with people. And it's been cool to see like how people have applied pieces of that. And it's like, I mean, I talk about the scale stuff all the time. And I think I'm really glad that early on in my coaching career, when it was like kind of sexy to tell people to like not weigh themselves because it made them uncomfortable, that I was like, no, like, hey, I think you learning and understanding why the scale like does whatever the fuck it does. I think that is more empowering than you avoiding it because you don't like the number on it.
100%.
And so, I mean, I think I kind of shove that down people's throats when they follow me, but you know, it's their choice to follow me. But I think it's cool for people to understand that your body weight does fluctuate. And like, I mean, mine, like even now fluctuates like 6-8 pounds over the course of the day. It's like, it's normal for that number just to be all over the place. And so when I have found with my majority of my clients, when we understand all those variables that make the scale do all sorts of things, it's like it creates a much better relationship with the scale as opposed to just like, I don't want to look at that.
Yeah. I really like what you said earlier about like one of your big benefits is from doing this is that you've been able to be able to manipulate and control kind of like how your body looks, what your body does. And I think that's super empowering. And so many 100%. People, like, I mean, again, it's like the fear of doing certain actions or taking certain steps. Like you don't know what's going to happen, but you have this confidence that you've done through this process that you understand what your body does, how things work, and it's not scary.
Right. And it's like, and the other piece of that is like knowing when and like when is a good time to push, right? Because I'm sure you guys see this all the time with clients too. It's like some people like they want to do a fat loss phase and it's like they have a newborn baby and a puppy and they're working 80 hours a week and like it's snowing outside and it's like, how about we just don't do that right now?
How about just not?
Yeah. Can we just like push that back a little bit? So I mean, I think that's what to me, like where the like all of this, in my perspective, all of this has to exist on like a foundation of acceptance. And I say this to people all the time, like changing your body can be really fucking fun. Like it doesn't have to be this like toxic, like diet culture thing. Like it can be fun and interesting and you can learn a ton about yourself doing it. But if you're changing your body to like yourself, that's where it's like, that's a hard stop for me. It's like, that's those two things. It can't be like that. Like learn to like yourself. And I'm not even saying like you have to learn to like your body. Like you might not like your body where it is. That's like, okay. But you have to like you. You have to like who you are. And you have to accept that your body is what it is at any given point in time. Like this like white knuckling, like I have to lose these whatever pounds. Like it does not end in positive outcomes. It really doesn't. Like I have gotten much better outcomes with people by encouraging them to fucking stay at maintenance for way longer than they want to. Like we're just going to hang out here and we're going to learn. You're going to learn to feed yourself. You're going to like literally appreciate the energy that you have. You're going to appreciate smashing it in the gym. You're going to appreciate the fact that you're not fucking starving all the time. You're going to appreciate the fact that you're sleeping well. Like, and it's like, once you can kind of get people to like, oh, like, I don't have to be chasing fat loss all the time. It's like, you can just like see the wheels start turning. And then it's like, when they get to a place where they're like, hey, like I'm ready, then it's like a totally different experience. It is interesting and it can be fun. But I feel like the acceptance piece, like it has to be underneath of all of it.
That's a mic drop right there, man.
Well, and I think too, it's cool to see that you kind of went from this place over the years of like, you just don't know what you don't know. And for so 100%. Many of us, like that's where we live for a while. It's like, in retrospect, you're like, man, I would do things so much different. But it's like, we end up when we're coming out of that, at some point, you kind of end up in this place where you almost feel like your body is betraying you, right? It's like, I'm 100%. Gaining all this weight. I feel like garbage. And
why is my body doing this to me?
And what it is, right, is it's like, well, actions do have consequences. And unfortunately, at some point those show up. But how cool is it that over the years, through acceptance and through education, you've then been able to come to this place of empowerment of, hey, if I want to gain muscle, I know exactly what has to be done to get there. Hey, if I want to lose body fat, I know exactly how to get there. And so I think like that's the coolest part is like, I've gotten to see all of those stages of you over the years. And again, it's like to see you on stage is just so wild and so cool. So, also just to selfishly be a hype girl and be like, dude, like it really is. It's cool for sure. Alex, did you have any other questions?
No, I mean, that was awesome, T. Really enjoyed listening. Yeah.
Yeah. This is so cool.
Well, Tiana, how can people find you / where should they go if they'd like to work with you?
So you can find me on Instagram, which I don't know if you guys can link it's Tiana Tallant. And then I actually do have a new website. I haven't formally launched it yet, but you guys can go there. It's just my first and last name, tianatallant.com. And you can apply to work with me there. I do one-on-one coaching right now. I have a handful of people that I'm also writing individualized programs for. So if you're wanting someone to like manage all of your shit, holla at your girl.
Real quickly, Tiana, who would you say your ideal client would be for like nutrition coaching? Like what would kind of be the bullet list of like, if you XYZ, like who would most align for you as a client?
Someone that's been trying to diet forever and is sick of like not kind of has that mindset of like feels like their body is working against them. Like those are my people.
Alex, question. How do we sign out now that we have the
I mean, I think we just sign off. We have an outro. So yeah, I mean, we've got our plugs for us in there. So
and it plugs. I'm like so excited for you guys. Like this is the coolest thing ever. I can't wait to like see where you guys take this. This is awesome.
We also have to, we got to keep this in the episode too, because this is just still part of the learning process.
Duh.
Over here trying to be official with intros and outros, but you're also like, so how do we end this? Well, Tiana, we miss you so freaking much, dude. So like, also we need to get together.
100.
Come hang you soon. But that's all we got for today, y'all. Thanks for listening.